Hi everybody, I'm so glad to be back for another season. We are gonna make two recipes today and they're both dessert recipes, or are they? We're gonna make a cookie and we're gonna make a dessert, but Italians actually eat a lot of pastries and cookies for breakfast. So today we're gonna do pizzelle, which is how I learned to pronounce it, but it's got an E on the end of it when you spell it, and from what I've learned, you always pronounce E at the end of an Italian name as E. So maybe we're making pizzelle. I'll have to check with my Italian friends just to make sure. But these are an ancient cookie. They actually are the first cookie that we know of in Italy. They started around the 8th century, if you can believe it. So we are gonna start by melting some butter. This recipe calls for melted butter to be poured in, but we want it to cool a little bit. So let's do that before we put all of our other ingredients together. And I'm gonna do this, you can melt butter in a microwave. I try not to use a microwave as much as possible. So I'm just gonna melt it in the pan. And here's a hack, so not my hack, but when I learned this, it's brilliant. When you take your butter out of the wrapper, fold this up and put it in your refrigerator. And when you have to grease a cake pan or muffin tins, you unfold this and just rub it on, and you've got your grease or butter to do your cake pans. So I think that's really smart, and you're not wasting any food. All right, let's get that melting. I'm really excited to let you see my kitchen. We're here in Dallas, Texas, and this is my kitchen. Blue's my favorite color if you can't tell. And I have this wonderful gas stove. It's even a gas oven, so I'm really excited to share all my recipes with you cooking with new equipment. We have our butter melted, it's cooling, so while that cools, let's put our other ingredients together for the cookies. So we are going to cream our eggs, sugar, and our vanilla and almond extract. When I crack eggs, you always want to crack these in a separate bowl. Since we're going to crack them first, we'll use the same bowl that we're going to put all the other ingredients in, but you want to do that just in case a shell breaks. Like if you're making a cake and the batter's already in there and you're adding an egg, you wouldn't want that shell to fall in that batter because then you'd have to start over. See, I got a shell in there. This is why we do it in a separate bowl. That's a great example. So now let's add our sugar. And we are going to mix this until it becomes thick and creamy. You could do this in a stand mixer, hand mixer's fine as well. I probably wouldn't whisk it unless you want your arm to fall off, because that would take quite a while and your arm would get tired and start to hurt. So we'll get this started, and then once we start to get this blended and it starts to thicken, then we'll add our extracts. We're adding vanilla and almond. Okay, you can see that that's starting to get thick. It's almost doubled in size. So we'll add our extracts. And you know me, whenever I bake, I make a mess in the kitchen. I probably should have an apron on. Okay, that's blended together. Now let's do our dry ingredients. Before we add it to our liquid, we are going to mix them together. So we've got flour, baking powder, which will help give a little bit of rise to our cookies, and a little bit of salt. And for baking, I use iodized salt instead of kosher salt. Normally I use kosher salt for all other cooking, but when I bake, I use the iodized salt instead. We'll just whisk this together. And then we are going to add that to our liquid. And we're gonna stir this together, and it's gonna form a nice cookie dough. So these cookies are really special. They almost are waffle-like, so they have a beautiful pattern. To make these, you do want to get a pizzelle press or a mold, and we'll talk about that when we get ready to make them. But it really just comes out beautiful. Now that we've got the flour mixture combined with our wet ingredients, we're actually going to start to drizzle in the butter, a little bit at a time. And this is gonna help our cookies achieve a nice golden color. and it adds a nice unctuousness to the flavor. These cookies are usually served at Christmas time, but they're so pretty, I think you can do them any time of the year. Okay, we've got our dough ready. I want to show you a pizzelle press. So this is Cuisinart, not expensive. I think it was like $40, so it's not a really expensive piece of equipment. But when I open it, it almost looks like a waffle maker. If you notice, it's got snowflake design. It's kind of like a waffle maker. And this will create a beautiful snowflake pattern. We're gonna dust it with some powdered sugar, and it's just gonna create a really festive, beautiful cookie. And here's the other thing you can do with these cookies. When you take them off and they're still soft, you could actually wrap them around a cannoli roll and let them dry, and then you can actually use these as your cannoli shell. So that's just kind of a neat way to create a variation with these cookies. All right, we're gonna take our dough, we're gonna start putting scoops in. On my waffle maker, there are 4 settings. So the higher the setting, the more golden and the more crispy. Some people like their pizzelles chewy and soft. Some people like them crispy. After practicing with this machine, 4 is kind of the in-between. So let's get started. When I put the scoop on the mold, don't put it exactly in the center, put it a little bit to the back, because when I press this down, it's gonna push the dough forward. And when I lock this, it'll tell me when it's ready to go. And we'll take it out, and then we'll just keep going and rotating till we have all of our cookies made. So the green light came on, which means our pizzelles are ready. And can you see how beautiful those are? We're gonna take them off, let them cool, we'll make some more batches, and then we'll get ready to decorate. So if you've been watching my shows the last 2 seasons, you know I'm not a baker, I'm not a pastry chef, and whenever I do bake, it's never perfect. If your cookies come out with a little bit of overflow, a little bit of edge, it's real simple. Just go around the edge and kind of cut that off to make it perfectly round. Now, before I decorate these, because I want them to cool a little bit, if we put the powdered sugar on them now, that might melt a little bit, so let's let these cool. So typically, if you were to eat these for breakfast, which even though they're cookies, they are waffle-like, so they kind of make you think of a breakfast food, you would have these with an espresso. Most Italians have espresso by itself. You would not want to order cafe latte in Italy, or they're going to give you a glass of milk, no coffee. So I've got my lovely espresso machine, and I'm gonna make myself a cup so we can enjoy it with our pizzelles. So espresso and coffee, you can get them in flavors, or they have tasting notes similar to wine. This one's my favorite. It actually has notes of Cabernet and Merlot in it, so of course it's my favorite. Our pizzelles have cooled, so let's put our powdered sugar on them. If you don't have a powdered sugar kind of little container like this, you can just use a strainer and kind of dust it that way. But I have too much chef equipment, so I have all these fancy things. I've seen them done where you've dipped them in chocolate and put sprinkles on them. You certainly could do that as well. You also could add about 4 ounces of cocoa to this recipe and make chocolate pizzelles if you wanted that chocolate flavor. But these are the traditional ones from Italy. I've got my espresso and my cookie. So this is my breakfast today. Perfection. Sweet and bitter, kind of balances everything out. So good. For our second recipe today, we're going to make semifreddo, which is a half-cold dessert, more mousse-like than an ice cream, but definitely something you'd want to eat as a dessert with maybe some espresso drizzled over it. So to get started, we are going to take cream and pour that in. If you don't have a stand mixer, you could certainly whisk this by hand or use, a KitchenAid, like a little hand mixer. Half of our sugar. And we're just gonna let this whip till we get stiff peaks. When you use a stand mixer, this can come together fairly quickly. So we wanted stiff peaks, and the way you can tell is when you do this, see how it stands up by itself? So that's a stiff peak, it didn't fall over on itself. So we're gonna take this out and put it in a separate bowl. We're gonna wash this so we can mix our other ingredients. So I've put our whipped cream in a separate bowl. We've cleaned out the mixer. We're going to take egg, some sugar, or the rest of our sugar, vanilla and salt, and we're going to blend this until it's pale yellow and almost tripled in volume. So it's interesting, this is definitely an Italian dish. Pronounced semifreddo. I've really got to work on my Italian pronunciation. I keep getting corrected when I go to Italy, which is my favorite Italian market to shop at here in Dallas. But this dish is kind of a take on a parfait that you would find in France. So it's very mousse-like, it's light and airy, and then we're gonna freeze it so it kind of becomes a frozen custard. So we'll get this going till it's tripled in size and pale yellow, like my dress. So this was not a lot of eggs, it was just a few eggs. And if you find that your sugar and other ingredients aren't all coming together because it's a small amount, it's okay to stop, scrape down your sides of your mixer and get that kind of all blended together and then start it up again till it's tripled in size. Our egg mixture has come to a pale yellow color. I'll show you. And it's tripled in volume. Does it match my dress? So now we're gonna take that whipped cream and we're gonna fold it into the egg. So we'll put that in there and I'm gonna show you what folding is. You don't wanna stir it. This is a very airy dessert. The whipped cream is what creates that air and that mousse-like texture. So if we stirred it, we would take all the air out of the whipped cream. So all you wanna do is fold it over and spin, fold it over and spin. We'll do this till it's combined, and then we'll be ready to put it in our loaf pan. So this is a dessert that you really should make the day before because it really should sit in the freezer overnight. Our next step would be taking that loaf pan like a bread baking dish, line it with some plastic wrap. That way it's easier to turn out the frozen dessert once it's done. I actually did one yesterday, so we've got one already frozen in the freezer. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't this a TikTok thing? We should have the music going, except that I'm too old and I can't get all the way down. All right. Loaf pan. Blue's my favorite color. Nice and frozen. We'll take this out, we'll slice it, and we'll serve our semifreddo. All right, everybody, moment of truth. It should come right out. Yes, look at that. And we'll take the plastic wrap off. Make sure you get all the plastic wrap because nobody wants to bite into that. We are going to slice this, is how you would serve it. And make a pretty presentation. I'm gonna do 2 slices. Tastes similar to ice cream because it's got that eggy kind of custard. You could drizzle berries on this. You could put whipped cream on this. I'm gonna drizzle a little espresso. So kind of a coffee kind of flavor on it. And that'll kind of soften it and make it nice and easy to eat. Normally, if you're gonna eat this for dessert later in the day, you would not drink espresso with this because then you would never sleep. And you guys know me, I love my wine, so I'm gonna have a glass with my dessert. This is actually the Bastianich family. So if you're familiar with Lydia Bastianich, who's had an Italian cooking show for forever, her son Joe does wine, and you can find this at Italy in Dallas. I think they have a location in New York and in Las Vegas. Buon appetito.